Thank you very much for coming. Good afternoon. To MassMEP and TribalVision, this is just a 30-minute information session on digital marketing for manufacturers. Humor me for the first 2 minutes. I'm going to very briefly tell you about MassMEP, and then we'll spend 28 minutes outlining digital marketing programs that we have custom designed for manufacturers. So MassMEP believes there is some element to every manufacturer's business that can provide efficiency and growth. If the manufacturer knows what that element is but can't fully execute on their own, we're there to help with that. If you haven't realized what that element for efficiency or growth is, please call us and we'd love to help you discover it. To support this, MassMEP has 3 basic programs. We've got a workforce training area, we've got continuous improvement, and we have growth and innovation. So today, we're focusing completely on the growth and innovation area. I won't get into those other areas. We use third parties oftentimes when we have a specialized area. In this case, MassMEP's teamed up with TribalVision, create several programs, and the programs have varying depth to them to help you market smarter. Each of these programs has been made more economical in that we have gone ahead and had them approved by the Mass Workforce Training Grant Program, so there's some level of subsidy if you choose to take them. So now let me just move into why you're here. Let me introduce Chris Yancey, the president of TribalVision, and he'll begin the discussion on digital marketing. So take it from there, Chris.
Great. Thanks, Peter. And thanks, Christy. Christy behind the scenes has put this together for MassMEP as well. I'll just very briefly give you a 30-second background on TribalVision, on myself, before we get started. So if you don't know about TribalVision and our partnership with MassMEP, we've been working together now for probably, what is it, Peter? Probably about 1.5 years or so, maybe even 2 years.
Yes.
Where over this time period, we've put together and refined, an offering for manufacturers in Massachusetts that ultimately is going to help you grow. That's what really the mission of TribalVision is, and part of the mission of MassMEP is, of course. So with that being said, just know that over these past couple of years, there's really 3 different avenues that you can be taking for you to try and bring your marketing game, as I like to call it, to the next level. I'm going to be talking about 2 of them on this slide, and just also know there's a third path that I know Peter can talk to a little bit, chime back in terms of seminars that would be offered to you. But high level, just know that this year there are 2 workshops upcoming in the fall. As you can see here on the slide, one is on October 17th, and the other is on October 24th. We've really compacted this in. We used to have 4 days dedicated to these workshops. We brought it down to 2 just from a travel purpose. We got good feedback that it would be great to just keep going instead of truncating each of these workshops to just a couple hours. So they're 4 hours in length. The first workshop, as I mentioned, is October 17th. It's just upcoming. We're going to be talking about what marketing really is today. So I'm really redefining what marketing is, because oftentimes manufacturers and companies in general really don't realize just how rapid the change has been in the marketing landscape over the last 5 to 10 years. So starting high level, talking about what marketing is today and how you can be using it, and that then will flow in that same day to tactically the tips that I'd be providing that really you can leverage when you go back to the office, right? I always like to say at the end of every workshop that I've done with MassMEP, hopefully there are really practical nuggets, whether it's what marketing platform you should be using, what marketing channels you should be using, what tools you should be using, what you shouldn't be doing, that you can go back with and start implementing right away. So just know the first workshop is high level, redefining what marketing is, which leads then into very practical tips that you could be using right away tactically. Second workshop, which is the following Tuesday, as you see here, it says building a strategic marketing plan and marketing tools to leverage. So that workshop focuses in on how you actually should be going about building a marketing plan, especially for 2018, right around the corner. Oftentimes manufacturers that I speak with, they say they have a plan. Well, half of them say they have a plan and half of them say they don't. The ones that do, it's typically, you know, bullets on a couple sheets of paper as to what they're going to do in the upcoming year, which again is certainly better than nothing, but we can really help you refine that, strengthen it, bring it to the next level so it can really produce results. So the first half of that morning is focused on developing a marketing plan, and so that you can actually do it yourself if you want to. And then that leads to the second half of that day, that morning, which is the tools that you can be using. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more for the final maybe 15, 20 minutes that I have. So I'm going to give you a taste of what that's about so it's a little bit more tangible for you versus just the way I'm talking now, which is a little bit high level introducing them. So that's one path, right? You can be joining the workshops upcoming. There's a fall session, which is right now, of course, and then we typically have a spring session. And in addition to that, we also have put together over the past year, which we've conducted, Peter Russo has really been a lot of the brain power behind this, but we put together a marketing consortium. So what's happened actually at the workshops is some companies have really enjoyed the workshops and they want more. So we then developed a consortium to then bring it to a whole nother level of depth, where those 8 hours of the workshops are then built into multiple days. So there, your company could join that, of course. I know Peter can talk a little bit more to the nuts and bolts and training grant money that's involved with that. But before he does, just know that your takeaway on the consortiums are, you think of it as the workshops are sort of snackable items that you can have, right? They're snacks that will certainly give you enough so that you can be dangerous and certainly have a leg up on your competition as to what's going on in marketing and what you should be doing today. And then the consortiums just deep dive in a much more rigorous way, in detailed way, into each of those topics. So the topics are similar. They're actually the same. Just, again, much more rigor is what those consortiums are made up of. And as you can see, we've broken down the marketing consortiums really into four different sections. Right. First is, again, marketing redefined. That's now 6 hours. Again, for large enough companies, we should be thinking about having senior leaders at that type of consortium. And from there, then again, it flows to the same thing: strategy and digital marketing tactics. What's different about the consortium versus the workshops, other than it's more rigorous, as I'm saying, is if you look at number 3, there's an on-site component to this. So once you're finished with the first 2 days of the consortium, I would then be coming directly to your location and doing an assessment. So you'll then have learned a lot, hopefully, in the first 2 days, and I can then come on site to then really get down to what's your situation. What really are the priorities you should be focusing on, so that by the end of that day, there's an evaluation and an assessment that's provided back that shows, okay, this is where you are strong from TribalVision's perspective, and this is where you need improvement. So it's customized to your company. And then there's a 4th day of the consortium, which is the companies that were in the first 2-day sessions. After we've gone through all the on-sites, everyone comes back for a debrief. And so there's shared learnings that can happen with everyone in that room. So it's really a nice sort of bow at the end here, right? Period at the end of the sentence to bring everyone together. So that's the difference between the workshops and the consortium. And Peter, do you want to get into the seminars? Because there's actually a third path as well that's really customized seminars that I know Peter, again, has been behind of making sure there's funding for this, et cetera. So, Peter, do you want to talk just for a couple minutes?
Sure. Let me just briefly say, first of all, the workshops are free. So they're 4-hour sessions. There's 2 different sessions. They're free. They're almost full right now, by the way, or one of them is frankly overbooked, which is wonderful. And we're going to, we'll find a way to make sure one can go, so we may change the venue and so forth. But those are free workshops, and they're coming up. So go to our website and sign up for those quickly if you intend to go. And again, they're wonderful sessions, a little bit like drinking from a fire hose, the old saying. Constant tips, we've gotten great response from people. What we then heard from a lot of people, though, is, gee, they'd go to the first sessions, they'd come to the second session and say, you realize that my management thinks of marketing the way marketing was 20 years ago. And so much has changed in the last year, not to mention the last 5 years, but even in the last year, so much has changed. Our management doesn't understand that there's a lot more than Google Ads out there for a marketing campaign. And these things were wonderful, but there's a little bit of a challenge with management strategy. Part of the reason we do the consortium the way we have it is a lot of companies said, gee, I wish you could do it in such a way my owner or my senior manager could go with me to an in-depth session. What this consortium pushes is the idea of, and frankly it helps you in that if you aren't a senior person in your organization, you're somewhat forced by the way the consortium is designed to go to senior management and say, I really would like you to be at a strategy session so that our marketing aligns with all of our operational goals and all of our growth goals. There's 2 sessions that you would be at. There's 2 sessions that you wouldn't necessarily be at. And it's really wonderful because a lot of people say, gee, I go to these sessions, but then it's very hard to convince my internal organization things have changed as much as they have in social media and so forth. So these consortiums allow you to meet with other companies. It reduces the cost. The cost in a consortium, we frankly get it under a grant from the state. So there's no real cost to you the company. But you're sharing that time. There's advantages and disadvantages to sharing that time with other people in the room. There's a third option, which is we have 5 seminars that are done under the Express grant, which means they're 50% paid for by the state. But the real value of those is there's 5 different courses, 3 days each. So now we're jumping up to 3 days per 5 different areas of marketing. It really jumps in depth. It allows you to do and execute at a much higher level. It's a commitment. It's a commitment by your company because it's about 16 days of time to train and to get your marketing, digital marketing strategies, tactics, and implementation in place. So that's the third grouping, and again, we have those on our website, and also you can call me and I can go over them with you individually. So finally, to wrap this up, we have the free workshop, which really helps people gain a perspective on how has marketing changed, what are all the ingredients today, and a whole bunch of tips and techniques you can use the minute you walk out. Then you have the consortium, which is a mixture of companies together in a room, plus a one-day on-site for your specific company with just your company. Real advantage there of having senior management buy-in from the top. And then finally, we have 5 individual courses, 5 unique courses that each are approximately 3 days in areas that, we don't want to take up the time going over each one of them, but 3 unique areas, which really gives you a very in-depth opportunity to plan and execute your digital marketing.
That's great. And again, this is an open forum, so if anyone has any questions, since we have a small group, feel free to chime in and ask away of any details if they come to mind while either Peter or I are talking, so feel free to interrupt. If there isn't anything, what I want to do now is I just want to give you a little bit more flavor. And again, I'm just going through the workshops because, as I mentioned, the content in the workshops are really going to be carried through and are consistent with the seminars and also with the consortiums. They'll just be in much greater depth. Okay, so this is where for you to decide if you are deciding, is this worth it for me as a company or not to join. Not to join, it's free, right? But to ultimately participate in, let's just say, a workshop or a consortium, this is your chance to see what really the topics are that I'll be hitting on. So I mentioned up front about redefining marketing. And so you'll see in this first workshop that there's a lot of preconceived notions as to what traditional marketing is. And so I really try and dispel the myth of, it's no longer right your grandmother or grandfather's marketing. There's an explosion and revolution that's going on right now that's really to the benefit of a manufacturer, as long as you're embracing digital channels and not just traditional, television, print, trade show, which still can be effective, but there's a whole other world out there that most manufacturers just don't know. So we're ultimately going to be talking about changing that conversation to first what marketing is not, and then from there, ultimately, if you see my mouse, what marketing really is. And so I'll be talking about what's called owned, earned, and paid marketing and what that means. I'll be focusing in on the customer journey with your brand and how to be thinking about strengthening touch points along that journey. And then really defining what marketing is today, which really is about lead generation. So just know that typically a business owner, a manufacturer, or C-suite executive perks up when they hear that marketing actually can be about top-line growth and actually be about generating new business. It's not just catalogs and renaming or redoing your logo or a basic website. It's far more sophisticated and powerful than that. So talk through that. Talk about technology. Just know that there's a lot that you can be doing if you're not right now with free technology that's out there that can automate not just your factory floor, but automate your marketing efforts so you can start achieving scale to get the lead volume that you're looking for. It's not like you have to hire a 3 or 4 person department with the technology that's there today. And ultimately, I then end with, while it is about finding new business, I then really talk about the customer and talk about how marketing can also be leveraged to delight your existing customers in ways that most manufacturers don't think about. So that's really the overview of the first day. Here's just a few slides. I'm not going to go over them, to be frank, very closely, just like Peter wasn't for each of the seminars, but it's just to give you a little bit of taste to some of the slides in these workshops. So talking about how traditional marketing is broken, that's really what this slide really talks to. Talks to also what manufacturers today, cutting-edge manufacturers, what channels they're using and likely to use in the future versus not use. So as you can see here, the dark red is they're increasing their marketing budgets more than 10% on mobile marketing and on social media. It's actually 44% and 37%. So you can really see what the smart manufacturers out there with big departments are doing. Again, one more slide just talking to how marketing today is not about interrupting and about pushing information out to someone, which is what marketing always has been over the years, right? If you're thinking of a television ad, you're pushing that ad to someone who might not want to hear about your message. With digital tools and channels that are out there today at your disposal, it's really all about content, and it's all about pulling companies in because you have something relevant to say. So again, I'll be talking a lot more about that in that workshop. Here's a slide again talking to paid, owned, and earned. So again, I'm going somewhat quickly, but again, we have 30 minutes, and this is just to give you a taste, precursor of what the topic is for you to make an informed decision. That's really the purpose of this webinar here. As I mentioned, at its core, marketing is about generating business, so there's going to be a whole section just talking about what that means, right? So as you can see here with what I call a vision board for TribalVision, we create dashboards for manufacturers so that in a very simple way they can see the number of unique visitors to their website on a weekly basis, email open rates and click-through rates. They're looking at search. There's metrics on search, of course, which is paid search, Google, social media. This is annual revenue volume, etc. So we would be talking about how you can be building your own, custom dashboards. Okay, so that's workshop 1. And then 2 here is, again, talking to, and Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, I might have actually, this is actually workshop 3, everyone, just so you know. So workshop 3 is talking about the strategic marketing plan. Let me skip that for a second and go here to the tactics that we mentioned. So just know that Marketing Redefined will then flow into marketing tactics. So in the second part of that workshop, we're going to be talking about the website, talking to website best practices, talking to Google Analytics and how to actually place that code on your website so it's not intimidating. We're going to be talking about the rise of a mobile phone. We're going to be touching on, again, SEM stands really for search engine marketing, which is the same as paid search, Google AdWords. So we'll be talking about how best to build out a paid search account, what SEO tactics you really should be leveraging, right, so that you can be found organically through Google instead of having to pay through SEM. We're going to be hitting on social media, of course, and also on email marketing. So there's a lot here. It's a really intensive couple hours where by the end, like I said, you're not going to be a genius when it comes to this, but you're going to know enough on all of these different channels that are out there that are being used today where you will know enough to be dangerous, and you will know really what your manufacturer, what your company should be focusing on first versus second versus third. So again, I try to make sure that these are very practical.
Chris, can I make?
Again, go ahead. Go right ahead, Peter.
Just a quick point, because Chris has a half dozen slides still coming that give examples of the things he's going to be teaching. But a lot of what you're deciding during that free workshop is, how much has my internal organization already bought into and supported this? How much do we need to change? And how much do we maybe need to invest? And I'm not saying in training or in anything, in your own company. One of the things I will say is that companies in general need to acknowledge and decide, do they have the money to invest in what type of marketing? Because manufacturers in general have oftentimes been word of mouth, single person salesperson. And now it's different, and people want to spread out that risk and sell in a lot of different ways, get into new markets and new channels. You have to decide and be able to determine how much you're willing and need to invest so that you can then focus on those activities that you can get the biggest bang for your buck. These seminars go into varying depths of how do you prioritize those opportunities to wisely invest your marketing dollars.
Yeah, that's perfect, Peter. And just know that I always like to simplify marketing to people, right? So think of it as two circles, and the two circles represent really the ways that most manufacturers grow. And those two circles, the outer circle is what most focus on. I would say 90% focus on the outer circle, which is sales, which is what Peter just said. You might have a couple inside salespeople, you might have a few outside salespeople, maybe you have distributors that you sell to or reps, and it's all about, well, if we want to grow, we have to then find the next rep or hire the next salesperson. That's really where most of the focus with the manufacturer is, whereas they're oftentimes forgetting, and this is where the power of these workshops and consortium comes in, is we focus a lot more on that inner circle, which is what can marketing do to actually provide that growth. So instead of, like, as I like to say, shaking hands and kissing babies, from a sales perspective and getting out there and pounding the pavement and going to that next trade show, what about putting in place digital marketing channels so that you actually can have lead flow coming in other ways? And so, to Peter's point about, really what you can get out of this separate from just a couple salespeople is you'll, by the end of this, know about that inner circle of marketing and the 4 or 5, as I like to call them, bullets in your gun that you can then eventually have. It's not going to happen overnight, but over a couple-year period, you could maybe have 5 bullets in your gun of marketing channels where that is not only supporting your sales team, but it's actually driving new leads. So that's really the exciting part, I think, at the end of these workshops is companies realize there are other ways to grow other than just hiring the next salesperson. Okay, so again, I'm not going to get into this too much. Apologize if I just skim, but it just gives you an idea of what we're talking to here. I'm going to be breaking down websites as to what the most important pieces of a website are. Oftentimes when I'm in these workshops, I take a look at the audience, have people raise their hand. Mobile phone. If it can appear nicely on a mobile phone. If not, that's probably the most practical piece of advice I give a company is don't do anything else but make sure that happens. And I can give you practical tips on making it happen for short money. And again, other low-hanging fruit I'll be talking to is Google Analytics. Most manufacturers know about it, but there's no one really placing that code on their website nor really tracking that on a monthly basis, so they have no idea what's going on with the traffic to their site. So that's a little bit about that second part of workshop 1. Okay, excuse me, of the first day. The second day I mentioned, let me go back. I have these in the wrong order. I apologize. is then day 2, right, which is, and that second day we're going to talk about how to really now develop a strategic marketing plan. Like I said, most manufacturers, they say, sure, I have a plan for 2018, but then once we really start uncovering what the plan is, we know that it can be much more robust and, of course, results-driven. So this is just a very high-level slide that I'm going to be starting with, but just know there are 6 pillars that we use, at least for our clients, on really developing a robust, practical marketing strategy. So there's, and again, I'm not going to go into this in depth, but just know it starts, of course, with market research, which then flows into positioning yourself properly and messaging yourself properly. Most times manufacturers skip 1 and 2, and they want to go right to number 3. And really the magic happens in the first 2 steps that I'm talking about here, the research and the messaging and positioning. But unfortunately, a lot of manufacturers, what I've found at least, they either don't have the patience or they don't see the value, so they just want to get right to what can I do today to get a lead in the door tomorrow and go right to tactics. So we'll focus a lot on the first 2 steps. We'll then be going through how you should be even figuring out which marketing tactics and initiatives you should be deploying and why. And from there, we then talk to marrying the right assets. An asset is, just think of it as your website or your message or an email template or a social media background or your pitch decks and proposals and landing pages. And, you know, I'll call that your owned marketing, as we talked about paid, owned, earned earlier. That just know that we'll really be focusing in on what assets do you need, but you have to tie that to the channels that you've selected because they're very different assets that you need. That then flows into metrics. So everything on the digital front can be measured, which is exciting, of course, and it can hold someone like myself or whoever you're using to market for yourself accountable. So we'll be talking about best practices in tracking all of your marketing efforts, and then that ultimately flows into tactics, right, in terms of not just tactics, but the implementation of those tactics. So I'm going to skip this. These are just, again, slides to show you some of the slides of what I'd be using, but I'll show you this one at least, right? So implementation of the plan is just as important as the plan itself is what I'm going to talk to. So here's a slide that I think is practical where this is not the strategy. This is the implementation of the strategy, where this is a software that we use and recommend called Smartsheet, where you then can fully build out the priorities and the initiatives over a several-month period. If you see my screen here, right, this is by month. This is when each of the initiatives is going to be happening. This is who owns each of the initiatives. These are the initiatives. This is where the initiative is and being completed. It's extremely detailed, and this is ultimately what's needed for a strategy to work, because we'll be talking about how the greatest strategy in the world is a complete waste of time and money if you actually don't implement it properly. So we'll be talking a lot about that, and then let me get back to the last part of that day 2 workshop, right, which is tools. And this will overwhelm you a little bit, but just know there are hundreds of marketing tools that have exploded onto the scene over the last few years, most of them free, that have a premium version to them that I will be touching on, right? And so I've broken this down in the last half of this workshop or consortium. I break the tools down by different buckets, right? So there are project tracking tools that I'll be going over, cloud storage tools, lead information providers, lead research tools to research your database, tracking tools, on and on, right? So this is exciting for me, at least. There's usually 30 tools that I go over. There's 3 tools per slice, if you want to think of it that way. And by the end, I can almost guarantee you that 5 or 6 tools out of those 30 are going to resonate with you to say, my goodness, we need to start this. And like I said, I'm not going to be recommending tools where it's a $500 a month tool, right? They're either free or, you know, maybe $100 a month, but it might be worth it given what you can do with that tool. Okay, so that's hopefully a good overview for you. Here's just a couple slides of just some of the tools. Right, so tool 5 I just picked out, right? There are tracking tools that provide macro insight on your overall digital marketing performance. So remember we talked about building out marketing dashboards and tracking all your efforts. we'll be talking about tracking tools. Another tool that's great is what's called display retargeting tools. So we'll be talking about those tools. You have no idea potentially right now what that means, but by the end of the workshop, you'll probably be pretty excited about this tool. Last slide. We're wrapping up here. I know I'm going over 2 minutes, so I apologize. Before you maybe have some questions, is just know that so far for the couple years we've done this, as Peter said, we've been met with some success, which is great. We're always trying to get better. We refine this program every year. Companies that have been implemented, there are some good success stories out there. If you just go to Google, and you'll see there's many 5-star reviews of the work that we can help you with. And more importantly, Christy, I know you have to share. I know that we have a survey that's done at the end of every, whether it's workshop or consortium.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you want to just share some of those comments you might have at your fingertips.
Yeah, I do, and it's interesting. I've been looking through them while you've been talking, and it looks like slide number 13 has been a big hit with all of these evaluations, the dashboards and the implementation, and I think that resonates with presidents and CEOs of seeing that return. But really, they've been more than outstanding, all the evaluations, and everybody has been able to leave the workshops with something that they can implement on their own, which I think is the most important piece. Yeah, and I'll just end with just saying, just know that there's no sales to this. So if you're worried that you're going to be spammed with me trying to shamelessly promote TribalVision, there's none of that. So it's literally all about you and all about your company and trying to get you better. So. And all you have to do is, and all I do is the same 2-minute pitch at the beginning of every one of these to let you know that there's other services MEP has. So does anyone we're over by a couple minutes. We started a little late. Any questions? Please speak up. It's only a very small group. Yeah. All right, Chris, wrap it up, and I hope folks at either the pre-seminar coming up or give a call, and we can do an individual meeting with you at your company. So let me know. Yep, yeah, that's perfect. That's really how I was going to wrap up as well. Is just if you have any other further questions, I guess maybe on the details of the nuts and bolts, it's probably Peter that you want to talk to from MassMEP. And if you have any marketing specific questions, feel free to reach out to me. The final slide, you'll see both of our email addresses. Let me just get to that slide here. So you'll see both Peter and my email addresses here. So any other further questions you might just not want to be vocal about on the webinar, feel free to reach out. But what's right in front of us right now is October 17th. If you do want to join that first workshop, or ultimately you have to just make a decision if you want to go that route versus the seminar route versus the consortium route. And hopefully this has been, there's been enough substance with just this half hour, so you at least have an idea of what you're getting yourself into if you see that there's some value there. So with that, I will close and thank everyone, and have a great day.